Hello, I'm Millie Lewis, and today I want to talk to you about Lexia Core 5 in the classroom and how it affects word recognition skills. So to introduce my PowerPoint, I really want to talk about why I chose this. So 70% of my students in first grade were struggling with word recognition, and that was hindering their ability to read fluently and to have good comprehension. So I wanted to search for ways that I could help them with this. And one of the topics that I found, one of the strategies was Lexia Core 5. And it was a system that we just started implementing in our school this past year. And everyone in my school district was asked to implement this in the classroom from pre-K all the way to 5th grade. So I thought this would be a great resource to look at since we just started using it to see if it really did help or if it really did not help. So I'm going to show you some research that I found there. When I did my research, I had 24 students in first grade. The data was analyzed to determine the impact that Lexia Core had on specific word recognition skills. Lexia Core 5 encompasses a lot of reading standards, but I looked specifically at word recognition skills in this study. And I wanted to see not only the effects of word recognition skills, but also how that affected their fluency assessments, and then later on their comprehension scores as well. So the purpose of my study was for students to increase word recognition skills, to see what the impact of word recognition skills was on fluency and comprehension, and to see the impact that the computer program had on each student in the different select groups I'm going to talk about later. So I did some literature reviews on this topic on word recognition and on technology in the classroom. So I'm going to go over a few of that information that I found there that I found to be very helpful. So the importance of word recognition skills is huge for students if you want them to be able to read fluently and to be able to master those skills. 25 of the first fry words are considered to be in 1/3 of beginning reader passages. And as you know, in first grade, we read a lot of beginning reader passages. And if 1/3 of those are the first 25 words and they don't know those passages become extremely hard for them to read. And then when you get down into all print is composed of a half of the first 100 fry words. So you're looking at 50 of the first basic fry words. If they don't have those, then they are really going to struggle as fluent readers. So when you're talking about reading, a student that is reading 95% of those words in the text without any problems, that's an easy level. And then you get to instructional level. And an instructional level is when a student can read about 90 to 95% of those words in the text. And then when you get below 90%, then they are at the frustrational level. And then they just want to shut down. So it's really important that they know those words so they can read at an instructional level, so it's still challenging enough to engage them, but it's not so frustrating that they just want to shut down and not read at all. So it's very important that we can identify those word recognition skills in those students so we can help them be better readers. So some of the other things I found when I looked at some literature was that the ability to read words automatically is the secret to reading. So if you can't look at a word and just automatically know what it is without sounding it out and blending those words back together, then you're going to have a hard time reading. So if you can look at those words and just automatically know what they are, then you're going to have a much better time reading, and it's going to be more enjoyable because it's not going to be nearly as difficult and tedious for you to do that. So beginning readers, most of the time they exhibit slow reading strategies. This causes them to have reduced comprehension in their reading. And it also gives them a longer time to read a passage, which causes off-task behavior. It causes behavior problems because they're frustrated. So it's very, very important to target this. When developing word recognition skills, beginning readers need to know more than just what the word is. They have to be able to know the letter shape. They have to be able to know the knowledge of the graphemes and the phonemes. And they have to be able to segment those words. So not only do they have to know the word on sight, they have to learn how it's formed first before they can ever do anything else. And just remembering the letters and giving them a distinct clue as to when they look at that word, this word is this word, will help them become better readers. So when looking at this, I wanted to also look at some of the activities that would involve technology. So when I looked at this, I wanted to look at enhancing word recognition through technology. So I looked at some resources, and I found that technology, of course, is everywhere in our world today. And the more and more that our society grows, the more technology grows with the society. So technology is now considered a vehicle for instruction. So not only can we use technology to help our students learn, it is now considered how we learn. So it's very important that we use strategies that involve technology to help students learn. Readers now read more information online than they do in books. So when we are teaching students to read and we just use one material, such as one book, we're hindering them because they need to be able to read resources from a multiple variety of texts. They need to be able to read books, magazines, online books. They need to be able to go on and play online games. That's really popular. So if they got to be able to do that, they've got to be able to navigate and read. So if they don't know how to do that, then that's going to hinder them later on in life. And this program will help them do that because it's part of technology. So looking at technology further, technology offers a way to individualize instruction for each student. So the student is going onto that computer, and the computer is going to deliver them instruction that's targeted to fit their skill set. They're not going to need the same skills that another student is. Every student is made differently. Every student learns differently. And through this program, it can decide which way they learn better, and it can provide them games and activities to help them in weak areas and strengthen areas that are already solid. They can also motivate students. I know Lexia Core does an awesome job of this, and really it depends on the educator and how they implement this in the classroom. But in my classroom, what I would do is when they would level up, they would complete a skill set, they would level up to the next level, they would get certificates, and I would always print those off, make a huge class deal about it, and they loved getting those. So it was a very, very big deal to those students to get this. So they can definitely be motivating. And then word recognition skills interventions. So Lexia Core provides not only word recognition skills, but it provides strategies through all 6 standards of reading. So you don't just get this one skill, you get multiple skills with this program. Also, it's represented in a variety of ways. Just like I said earlier, not one student learns the same. So it's very important to present that data, to present those standards in multiple ways to address those student needs. It also uses auto placement test scores. So as soon as the student logs on, what they will do is they will be directed to take an auto placement test. And after they take that test, it will provide the student with what they need, what they're strong in. It also gives the teacher great resources they can print out for parents to send home on what they're strong in, what they're weak in, and areas that they need to grow in, that they're not too low in. So this provides a great resource to start them out where they need to be. And no one's the same, so everybody starts where they need to start at. It also provides an instant recognition of high frequency words. So through this program, it targets those 6 strands of reading. It targets word recognition skills. And if the student is having trouble, it makes them repeat that word. And if they keep having trouble, then it kicks them to this place where teachers can go in and see the words they're having trouble with and print out resources to help that student. So here's the reference page. It just basically goes on to say where I got all this research. And there's some really good research references here that you can go in and see how important word recognition skills really is and how it can help students. Not only that, but how technology helps students learn also in today's society. So my research question for this was, what effect does the computer adaptive program Lexia Core 5 have on first grade word recognition skills? So why did I want to do this? And I told you a little bit about this in the beginning. I had a first grade class that were really struggling with word recognition skills. Like I said before, 70% of my students out of the 24 did not know the first 100 words. The first 100 words were words they should have mastered in kindergarten. before they came to first grade. In first grade, they have a set of 200 words that they need to follow. And those 200 words are what they need to know before they can be a successful second grader to begin second grade. So they really needed to know that, and I knew I needed to do something. I needed to find a strategy to really get those students to be able to learn those words. All teachers in our district started using Lexia Core 5 this past year, so it was new to our school, and we all had a lot of questions about it. We've had some professional development on this, but I wanted to take it a step further and see how is it affecting my students, how is it affecting their other test scores. So students I found that also struggled with fluency were also struggling with word recognition skills. And fluency is a really big thing in first grade. So that's one of the reasons why I picked word recognition skills, because I knew it was directly linked to fluency. So I wanted to see how that worked through Lexia. And this research will determine whether it had a positive or negative impact on my class. So the sampling and participants that I had in my study, there was 24 first grade students. Of that 24, 11 were girls and 13 of those were boys. They ranged from ages 6 to 8 years old. Two of those students had speech IEPs. 3 had reading IEPs. 3 had behavior interventions. Those were students that really struggled with behavior, and due to their behavior, they were really low because they just did not want to be in the classroom. They did not enjoy learning at all. I had 3 students that were retained that were really low, but they were about on level with the rest of my students. And then lastly, I had 5 students in RTI who were extremely low and were still working on kindergarten standards in my RTI group. So looking at this further, 6 students out of my 24 were considered below level. They were on that kindergarten level. 10 of those students were about average. That's where they needed to be in first grade. They were right where they needed to be in that time and place. And 8 students were exceeding grade level. Some of them were working on second and third grade standards. So looking at what I wanted to measure, I wanted to measure, of course, their fry words, the word recognition skills. And to do this, I used a fry word test that our district uses as a progress monitoring tool. It can be found online under the fry word list from 100 all the way to 1,000. So we use this from pre-K all the way up to 5th grade to measure their progress for word recognition skills. So I used that as one of my assessments. I also used Reading A to Z for fluency. Reading A to Z is a great website that you can differentiate different passages for students. Like I said before, I had a lot of students that were low, middle, and high. So I could not just teach them all the same. So this website, Reading A to Z, allowed me to go in, find a text on their instructional level, and print it off. And what I would do is on Monday, I would give them that text. I would let them practice until Friday, and then I would score them on that text to see their fluency. So like I said, I wanted to see how fluency affected their word recognition skills. So I wanted to include that in my study. I also wanted to include, of course, Lexia Core 5. That was my biggie here. I wanted to see if this program was helping the other 2 I just mentioned. So I used that data to see if it was reaching those students by giving them that differentiated instruction. And then lastly, the students on Lexia will complete an average of 60 minutes. And as I go on through my presentation, you will see that some students received more and some students received less, but on average it was 60 minutes. So looking at my instruments, here's an example of the first 100 fry words. So you see, this is just the first 100. I did not put the second 100 on there just to save space because there was a lot of words, but here's an example of what it would look like. So the students will be given a sheet like this, and all you do is you go down through there and you ask them what the words are. And if they can say the words on sight, they get a check. That does not mean that they are sounding the word out. So if they're looking at the word it and they go it is not counted correct because that is sounding out and blending back together. Part of the fry word assessment means they know it on sight. One of the reasons why they are called sight words. To be able to read fluently, they got to be able to do it on sight. So it's very important when assessing these, they do it on sight. So that's how we would grade that. So they would just have to go that, with very quickly as soon as they see it. So our district uses this, like I said before, and they were required to know the first 100 and the second 100 in first grade. Alright, so this is an example of the fluency passage that I use in first grade. So this is called Bees. It's a reading A to Z passage that's a level G, which is about on level for students this time of the year. That was when the data was taken. This is not a low level passage. This is not an above level passage. So it's an on level passage. And it goes all the way to 74 words per minute. And to be able to read fluently in first grade, we would like them to be able to read at 60 words per minute. So if a student can get there, they're on target. So this would be an example of a passage that would give my on-level students. I would go in that program and I would look for passages that were below level G, more catered to my students, like a level C or a level B to my below level students. And my above level students could even get all the way up to level R. So that's an example of that. And those are assessed weekly. And what I would do with these is, like I said before, I would give them to them on Monday, let them practice throughout the week, and assess them on Friday. But I would also give them a fresh read on their same reading passage. So I'd make sure that I would give them a practice read score and then a fresh read score. A fresh read score is where you just give them the text, they read the story to you, and you score them where they stop. Okay, a fresh read will tell you how much they are just comprehending from the environment. This will tell you a lot about memorization, but this is a great way to promote success in your students. It's a great way to give them confidence. I had many students in RTI that were reading the low-level passages. A lot of them were remembering the text, but on test day, when they read the practice passage and they knew they could read, and some of them were getting 60 words per minute, and they were meeting their goal they set for themselves. They were so proud of themselves. It made them love reading. And if I can hook a student into loving reading, then I can start giving them fresh reads and then being able to read more. So I really, really love the impact of reading A to Z. When looking at Lexia Core 5, there's an example right here of a game that they would play for word recognition skills. They're building the word they, and what they would have on the screen is mixed jumbled letters. So they might have H, E, Y, T, and they would have to put those in the correct order. And after they did that, the game would tell them the word they, give them positive praise, and move on to a new word. And they would have to be exposed to one word multiple times before they mastered that skill. Because as we all know, it takes multiple exposures to be able to put anything into our memory and have it for long periods of time. So that's an example of one of the activities that they would play. Also, when they level up, I would print out certificates. I would give those to them to take home so they could show their parents and be very proud. All that positive promotion here. If students are proud of what they do, they're going to want to do it more. So the data that I used, when I did my collection of data, I looked at fry word assessments, all the way up to 200. I looked at student fluency scores, and I looked at Lexia Core 5. Okay, so I assessed fry words monthly here. I assessed fluency assessments weekly. And I assessed on Lexia Core 5, I would go in and I would look at the printouts weekly as well. The computer program does all of that for you. It's a great resource. I would send that report home to parents bi-monthly. So twice a month, I would print that out, send a note attached to it, say this is how your child is working in the school, and this is the areas that they're doing awesome on. This is the areas that they need some help on. And I would provide the parents and guardians some activities with those that they're struggling with, because this has great resources to help your students do that. Awesome resources, and it tells you what they need to be targeted on, and it gives you a printout of resources to use with that child. So looking at my data, so here's the fun part. So looking at data analysis, so we're going to look at the baseline of Lexia Core 5. So I told you before, they auto-placed my students in the program as soon as they logged in. So if you look down here at my graph, I have a graph that's showing the number of students. So remember, I had 24 students total, and I have down here level 1 all the way to level 8. So let me explain what those mean. Level 1 is pre-K. So if they scored in pre-K on the auto placement test, I knew they were really low and we had a lot of work to do. And it went from level 2, which was beginning K. Notice that I had 5 students at level 2, 1 student at level 1. So right there off the bat, I already have 2 students that are beginning K and pre-K. So those are really low because remember, we are in first grade here. So let's look at level 3. Level 3, I have 2 students, nobody in level 4. Level 5, I have 1 student. Level 6, now this is where the majority, the average of my class is. I have 12 students, which is half of my class. 50% of my class are on level 6. And looking at our key, level 6 is beginning of first grade. Now keep in mind, when we took this auto placement test, it was in January, close to February. So at the end of that month. This was the middle of first grade. We should have been higher. As a whole, there should have been more students above level 6. But the majority of mine were at level 6, beginning of first grade. So I knew that most of my students were at level 6 or below, so I had some work to do. And I wanted to see, would this program help? So looking at my data, I wanted to see why my students could have scored this. So some of the reasons my students could have scored below a level 6 or at a level 6 was because I had a lot of students in RTI. I had a lot of students with behavior problems. Their behavior was impeding their learning. They didn't want to do anything, so that really affected them. Focus was a big issue. I had some really, really bright students in my classroom, but they were really hard to stay focused. So those students that really had a focusing problem here, those were students that I was wondering, is their assessment score really correct? So I wanted to compare those students, especially to the ending result, to see if it mattered. So going on, this is a data graph, a point graph, a line graph of their usage in Lexia. So as I said before, I want my students to receive a 60-minute period over that week time in Lexia. So when we first started, it was new. We were working out the kinks, trying to figure it out. So when I first started, I did not have very good usage. But then in about March, it picks up. So I got about 50%, 56%. Also remember that February and March are snow months. So that could be a reason they're not meeting their usage. Because of no school due to weather, to holidays, that was a big factor there. Some of my students did work on this at home, and so sometimes when the usage is like that, it's because we weren't even at school, but they were at home and worked on it. That's why my usage wasn't higher. So then really at the end of March on to May, we really plateaued here, and we got about 100% usage. We dropped down to 91% here, but for the main part, we were really steadily growing. We were really working hard in that program. So looking at my data from my baseline data to my ending data. Okay, so the data that I took at the end of first grade to compare to what it was when we started the program. So if you look at the dark blue, those bar graphs show you the baseline data, where my students were when they auto-placed. And then the light blue shows you the last assessment result. So you can look at that and you can see that it did grow. So if you look up here, at the beginning, 38% of students were placed below grade level. After instruction, after using Lexia, 25% were placed below grade level. So we have a drop there, and that's a good thing when you're looking at that data. 63% were at grade level here. So a little bit more than half were above grade level when they first started this. When you're looking at it afterwards, I had 71% of students that were on level, and then I had 1% of students that was actually above level. So if you look at my chart, I have 1 student that's on level 10, which is actually beginning 2nd grade. So this program worked wonders for that child. So looking at my data a little bit more in depth, taking some snapshots, I wanted to compare my data to my RTI kids, to my on-level kids, and to my students that were above where I thought they should be in first grade. So this really gives me a really good look at it. So looking at this, I have their baseline data and their end of the year data, and I feel like this speaks volumes. Most of my students were below 3, they were on level 3 or below level 3 for the baseline data. after this instruction. Now my RTI students, they received more minutes for this. They received the 60, but they also received additional minutes in RTI when we did assessment. So they would work on this program while I would pull them back individually to assess on fluency and fry words. So they received more. So they got all the way up to, some got close to 90 to 100% of time on Lexia. So you can see that those students were level 3 and below for the majority. I had some on level 5. After this program, the last assessment they took, I had them from level 3 all the way up to level 7. So you can see that shift that really helped my RTI kids. It was amazing to see. So looking at my on-level kids. Now these kids, I feel like it helped, but not nearly as much as my RTI kids. So looking at this data, I had just one student at level 3, one student at level 4 on the baseline data, and then everybody else was at level 6. So average on level, most of them were level 6, with 2 outliers on levels 3 and 4. After instruction here, I still have students on level 6. The majority, I have 5 here, but then I have 4 students that are on level 7 now, and I have some students on level 8 now. Now there was a few students at the on level grade level, that they were at level 6 and they were still at level 6 at the end. Now for those students, I looked deeper into that. Those were the students that had focusing issues. They would get on the program, but they wouldn't do anything in the program. So it looked like they were working, but they really weren't, because it wasn't banking any of their time, because they weren't working on any skills for their time to add up. So that was one of the reasons why my on-level kids didn't grow as much. They also didn't use the program outside of school, and they didn't get that extra time that my RTI kids did. Now looking at above grade level students, most of them, for some reason, now this one looks a little different because it only goes to 4, because on this I didn't have as many kids here. So I only had 6 kids when I looked at this data. So when you look at it, you can see that my baseline data, I had 3 students at level 2, and those were the students, like I said earlier, I knew they could do better, but they didn't do very well, and I think it was a focus issue with them. And so then I had one at level 6, 7, and 8. After the implementation of Lexia Core, I had students at level 7 all the way to level 10. So it definitely helped my above grade level kids. What I noticed about these students were they loved positive praise. They loved to get their certificates. They loved to be bragged upon, and they had a great family support system. And I would send home the login ID so they could use this program at home. Most of these students used it at home. Most of these students would ask any free time we had during the day, can I get on Lexia to bank my time to level up? So this program worked wonders for my above grade level. And again, it's educator based. If whatever the educator does, it's going to help the program. So if the educator promotes this program, it's going to help the kids better. If you do not give yourself 100% into the program and show the kids that it's important and then praise them for it, then it's not going to be nearly as effective. Alright, so looking at Lexia, the data summary. So what I found was that 78% of students are working at or above grade level after the implementation of Lexia. 25% are still working below grade level. So those 25%, I still need to find a new strategy for them that's going to work, because Lexia did not work for them very well. I have 61% of students that are meeting their average goal. So I would like to make that higher, because I think if I would make this higher, that might help my 25% of below level students. Multiple students receive RTI instruction to address skills that are not mastered. So that's going to help there. And all students shown growth within levels. So even the students that, like I said before, that were on level 6 at the beginning and still on level 6 at the end, they still shown growth through level 6, but it was just small growth. It wasn't great amounts of growth. Okay, so looking at fry words. So how does Lexia Core 5, how does that instruction spill over to other things in the classroom? So I really wanted to focus on word recognition skills. Best assessment to do this, fry words. So I looked at my fry words. And my baseline data showed that from 1 to 50, the students that were in this were either in RTI or in special ed. So if they scored from 1 to 50, and those were 8 of my students, they either had an IEP or they were in RTI and they were going to be referred to special education. So those were the students that really, really struggled. This would be 1 to 50 words is middle kindergarten level here. So you want to make sure that you really get those students now so they can achieve better later. So 51 to 100 words, students have about 10 of those that we're just now getting the kindergarten words. They were just now getting that. And then from anywhere from 101 up to 200, those were the students that were in the first grade range. So if you look at my data, it shows that only 6 of those students out of the 24 were working on first grade words. That's my baseline data. So some reasons why this looks like this is lack of focus. I've explained that. We had some trouble with that with some of my students. Behavior problems impeding their learning. RTI students that were going to be referred to the special education process, some that were already in the special education system, and then lack of instruction. When this data was taken, there was lots of missed school due to weather, and that was a big factor there, and sickness, of course. So looking at my Fryer data, comparing it to the ending data at the end of my study, 75% knew less than 100 words at the beginning. After this, at the end of first grade, 33% knew less than 100 words. So there was a huge jump here. So it went from 75 to 33% of just knowing 100 or less. So that's awesome, awesome results. So when I look down here at knowing more than 100 words, when I first started this, only 25% of my students knew 100 words or more. After the implementation of Lexia and working on Fryer words within the classroom, 67% knew 100% or more. I would like for those numbers to be higher, but that is a great increase. Great increase. So my data summary here. Like I said before, I cannot just say Lexia Core was the reason they increased on Fryer words, because I used other things within the classroom, such as in text. When we would read a story, we would talk about those high frequency words that was there that we were working on through the week. We would do flashcards in the hallway as we were lining up. We would do flashcards as we were leaving the door, as exit and enter cards, kind of like passwords. We would build the words with word piles. We would play center games. We would do flash fluency with words. We would build sentences, like 7-up sentences, where they had to come up with a sentence with 7 words with their Fryer word in there, and that would have to make sense. So we would do lots of things with Fryer words. On average, the average student in my first grade classroom learned 105 more Fryer words than they did at the beginning of the baseline data, which is phenomenal. It's awesome. Awesome results. Students have higher Fryer word identification scores. I've noticed, and I'll get to this in a minute, if their Fryer word scores were higher, their fluency was higher. And that makes so much sense. If they can read words on sight, then they're going to be able to apply that to other applications like fluency passages. So looking at fluency, and I talked about this and how I wanted to see if it kind of connected. So my baseline data, when I first implemented Lexia, I went back and I looked at my fluency scores. So looking at my pie chart, this dark blue here, this is 67% of my students are below 40 words per minute. That means when they read that passage in that 1 minute, they only could read 40 words or less. Most of the time, it was less. Okay? And then when we're looking here, 16% knew 40 to 60, which is pretty average for a first grader at that time of the year. And then 17% was above 60. And those are my really good readers, my above grade level students. Some of the reasons why my data looked like this was lack of word recognition skills. Their Fryer words were low. This hindered their fluency. They had a hard time decoding words. So when they got to those content-specific words, they tried to sound them out, They tried to blend them back together. Sometimes they were successful, sometimes they were not, but it slowed them down on their reading skills. Their tracking was bad. Sometimes they would read one line, and they would skip a line, and they would read the next line. Or they would skip some words in the line, and that would hinder their score as well. Lack of engagement. I would try to provide my students with passages that were engaging for them. If they enjoy reading about ocean animals, I would try to present them with that passage so it would be engaging, so they would love to read. But sometimes that was really difficult. And of course, weather was also a factor in this. When looking at my data analysis here of my fluency assessments, students need to read at 60 words at the end of first grade. That is the goal set by the district. That's what we want our students to be able to do to be successful beginning second grade readers. So I wanted to make sure that I did everything in my power to get them where they needed to be, to get them to grow. And even if they were already there, I did not want to stop them. I wanted them to continue growing. So I wanted to make sure that I found a program that would help with this. So looking at my fluency data on my baseline data compared to my end scores when I stopped Lexia, I had, like I said, 67% were below 40. They were below 40 words. At the end, only 29%. So that's a pretty big drop. You can see that a lot of my students really did well there. One second. Okay, sorry about that. Alright, so and then we're talking about 40 to 60 words per minute. So when we talk about that, that went from 16% to 33%. Now that jumped, but when you think about that, that's a good thing because some of these students that were below 40 are now in the 40 to 60 category, so they are growing. And then above 60, that's where we want them to be. That's end of first grade. That's their goal. 38% there. So that's great. I would love for this number to be higher, but it just didn't get there. And I'm hoping that in the future I can do more to help them do that. So when reflecting on this whole process, I reflected on the time that students spent on the program versus their success and word recognition skills. So the more time they spent, I noticed the better they did. The more words they knew, and the more content, the more levels they moved up. So my RTI group, my above grade level kids, they really did awesome. So I'd really like to do more to get my on-level students really involved in wanting to participate in this at home and extra time in the classroom. So I'm going to offer some more incentives for them to do that. I analyzed my different ability groups. So my RTI group, my average group, my above average group, and I was able to see how everything kind of played out. So in the future, I'm going to not only look at my data as a whole, but I want to look at snapshots of my data and see how my students are performing. And if one group is performing better than the other, I'm going to look at why and how can I use that data to help the other groups that are not. And then of course, I found that this program has great resources for parents, great resources that you can share with colleagues that are struggling with the standard, and great resources to share with your administrator. If they're coming to you and they're not sure where your students are or what you need to do as an educator, where your professional growth can be, you can print these scores out. You can say, okay, my students are all really struggling here. Is there anything I can do to promote my professional growth in this school that will help me achieve this for my students? And then lastly, I reflected upon how I could use Lexia Core 5 in the classroom to promote the future growth of my students. And I want to make sure that I'm using this program with fidelity and that I'm using it 100% and that I am promoting this product to my students, to my parents, to my colleagues, and I'm showing them this program works because if I, as an educator, believe in it, your students will believe in it too. Thank you for watching my video.